there's a game that I like to play with employees that really struggle with delegation and prioritization. It's called You Can Only Take Five. And I paint a scenario where you're on a sinking ship and you have five things you can add, you can take with you. Now, I know you got 20, but you can only take five.
Welcome to MetaGagement, the HR show that dives deep into the heart of employee engagement and workplace culture. Your hosts, Ann Scottlin and Dr. Lyman Montgomery, bring you a groundbreaking show that explores innovative strategies and insights to transform and elevate your organization's HR practices. Dr. Montgomery is an employee engagement expert and best-selling author, while Ann Scottlin is an acclaimed business consultant and podcaster. Together, they will unpack the complexities of modern HR challenges and reveal innovative solutions that can be immediately applied to your workplace. Please welcome Ann Scottlin and Dr. Lyman Montgomery.
Welcome back again to MetaGagement-HR, a really fun podcast where we get to spend a few minutes with you and talk about HR challenges. We talk about neuroscience, we talk about actionable solutions, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So join us. Thank you for being here today. If you know someone else who might love this conversation, shoot them this link right now so that they can join us now or later. So before we get started, just want to remind you that this is the last of our three-part series, which is 3 strategies to prevent employee burnout. Of the many issues that we face on a regular basis, employee burnout is one of the most critical. And we talked last time about how it's often neglected. Early signs, asking questions, learning to listen, involving the whole team in finding solutions. So I'm going to count backwards. Last time was the first week we talked about helping employees cultivate a clear vision. You can check that one out. And then after that was how to reduce employee stress. So going from overwork to optimize. And today I'm going to tell you what that strategy is. But first of all, Dr. Lyman Montgomery, so happy to have you here today.
So glad to be here. It's always exciting to work with you in and to share these strategies for the HR community. So thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, he is my amazing co-host, and we get to stream with you weekly. So come check us out every week at the same time and send us your comments and questions. So I'm Ann Scottlin, and today we're just going to hit the ground running. The number one strategy to prevent employee burnout has to do with the underappreciated employee. How do you really boost? How do you really? That's what we do. We burst morale. How do we really boost morale when employees feel underappreciated? And that's what we're going to talk about today. I think this is one of our most important topics in the whole MetaGagement HR conversation. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree 100%. It is perhaps the number one. If you were to survey 100 employees across 100 different industries, the number one issue that majority of employees feel is undervalued, underappreciated for the work that they do. So you definitely hit the nail on the head with that one, Ian.
And what are some examples? You have been in this industry for over 20, 25 years already, Lyman. What are some examples or environments where you noticed burnout, where you realized that it was really coming from an underappreciation? Can you have any memories of single people that you worked with or companies that you've worked with where you noticed that?
Yeah, I share two real quick
Single
examples.
individuals, Lyman, not single
Yeah,
people.
I follow you. So we were working with an organization, uh, and part of the struggle was they weren't getting maximum results from the team. And I went in, did an assessment, an audit, and what I found out is every time they hit a milestone, it was never celebrated. It was almost like the old song, "What have you done for me lately?" And
Yeah.
so the team started feeling demoralized. It's like, wow, we bust our behinds, we come in under budget and we don't even get a thank you. It's like, okay, what's the next project? And there wasn't an opportunity to celebrate the win. And that's probably the biggest issue, celebrating the win. Those small wins will put wind beneath your sail to go further. Another example was working with an organization where they didn't have any type of rewards or recognition. And the reason being is they had a old school supervisor that said, "Your reward is when you get a paycheck." Imagine how demoralizing that is that no matter what I do, there's no thank you, no appreciation, no job well done. And this person's response was, well, you get paid every 2 weeks. That's your reward. And so we need to change that and really think out of the box, go meta with helping employers, supervisors to recognize how do you motivate and appreciate your team. It's not always money. Sometimes it can be something as simple as a handwritten note that says, "Great job, team."
Absolutely. And I think, and also group appreciation, even if it's not the annual awards sort of situation, right? I was talking to someone just this week and they were saying, I used to, they work for a software company, they sell software, and they used to say, our wins used to be really exciting because we were acknowledged in a live environment, either in person
Hmm.
or virtual live environment. And then they decided to be, or even they had a bell or, whatever. They said now it's just become, they've made it all virtual, all online rather. So you just get to go into the chat, the under wins, and type out your chat in case someone happens to go in there to look at them. And how different that was. Like it sounds so efficient, but it became so bland and uninteresting and unmotivating that nobody really cares anymore. And it was that simple, a really good company. And yet they didn't realize how important it was to share those wins in the room, to allow people to really celebrate and more just, oh, just post it. Like it doesn't matter what you really do, just post it. So
Hmm.
if someone wants to know, they can go look, but it doesn't really celebrate. That's not a celebration.
That's not a
Yeah.
celebration.
Well,
Uh,
one of the things,
imagine
mm,
Imagine if your favorite team won the Super Bowl, the cup, and they said, "Well, we're not going to advertise it, no parade. We're just going to put it in a chat room." I mean, that would
seriously,
almost be sacrilegious in some states, right?
yes,
What do you
yes.
mean we're
Oh,
not having a parade?
absolutely. No, I think that's a really good example. And what it tells the employee is that they're not worth celebrating.
Yes.
Their hard work is just part of the job and it's not worth celebrating. And I think as a culture, a Western culture, we don't celebrate enough. We could learn a lot from, other cultures around the world who do a much better job at celebrating than we do, especially in like the sanitized corporate environment.
Hmm.
But finding ways to do that is part of what is going meta. That's what's really going to help boost morale. So first of all, we want to go meta by identifying overwork, right? Because the brain, when it's, as we know from neuroscience, when the brain is under prolonged stress, it eventually starts reducing your cognitive flexibility and it leads to decreased problem solving abilities. It leads to decreased creativity. So, what are the one of the ways that we can identify overwork, even if it's not obvious?
Yeah. One of the things going back to what you're talking about as far as when the brain is under prolonged stress and exhibiting these cognitive inflexibility, decreased problem solving, a lot of times the brain is dehydrated. And one of the things that I often will share with folks is like, how often are you hydrating? Because when you're under stress, a lot of times you're not drinking, you're not moving the body, you're sort of isolated, you're looking at the computer screen 8, 10 hours. You're not taking a break. I know folks that said, man, I've had to go to the bathroom for 6 hours, but I was afraid if I got up, I would lose my train of thought. The truth of the matter is, no, you need to get up, go to the restroom, relieve yourself, and hydrate because
It's like
your
trying to run
body,
your sports car on empty all the time.
yeah,
You know how bad that is for the engine?
yeah. And we wonder why we exhibit these physical signs of depression, of burnout, is because the body is sending us signals that, okay, these people, I know people that work and it's, oh my God, I'm having headaches, I'm feeling fatigued. And a simple solution is hydration and mobility. Getting up, walking around. There's a concept in neuroscience called chunking, where you take a big project and you really basically chunk it down into smaller projects. You work on them for, let's say, 30 to 45 minutes. You set a timer and you stop what you're doing at 45 minutes. I prefer 30 minutes. And you get up and you do something physical, walking to the bathroom, walking to the water fountain,
Well, and
because
walking
you
is such
have
a
to
key
change.
of it
Yeah,
because, like, all right, we know there's been a big thing, at least in California, against straws. Although I think we're coming around because I asked for a plastic straw yesterday and I got one. So I was like, oh my gosh, because I love plastic straws. I love straws and I hate slurping out of that thing that like makes a mark on your face, like whatever.
right,
So,
right.
but for example, if you have a cup with a lid and a straw, even if it's recyclable, or even if it's one that you can keep washing, you can walk and sip. You can walk and sip and talk. You don't have to just do one or the other. Or you can always keep, I mean, do you see, Lyman, the size of this glass? Here, I'm going to put it
Yes,
next to my ear so you can tell I'm not exaggerating it. It's like actually, so this is a full pint. And my minimum goal every day is to drink 4 pints. That's absolute minimum. And if I can do 6 to 8, then I do. I mean, everybody's different, but got to keep the skin glowing, Lyman. But hey, your skin is a really good telltale, right? Because
it
what do
really
you think
is.
your
It
brain
really
looks
is.
like? What do you think your brain is looking like when it's sluggish and dried out and your circulation is thick and slow? Have you ever had to go give blood or get blood drawn at the doctor when you forgot to drink water in advance? Hurts
Oh yeah,
like
it's like
because
sludge.
they have like sucking jello out of your veins
Mhm.
because you're so dehydrated. It's awful.
And most people, they don't know that they're dehydrated. They have just become accustomed to having headaches in the morning, feeling fatigued. Some feel nauseated. They're like, well, I'm just under a lot of stress. And the truth of the matter is, when the last time you drank healthy water?
Mm.
Now, that's a whole nother subject for another time. We
We're
start talking
not
about
going to talk about
healthy
water with
water.
you because we know you're a water snob of
I
water
am, I
snob.
am, I am.
I
But
didn't
it
drink
does make a
tap. I
difference.
didn't drink tap. This is out of the filter, but this
All
isn't
right.
like imported from some other part of the world. So
Yeah. But all that makes a difference. And that's just one of the signs or strategies that you can do to help the neuroscience of the brain is hydration and mobility.
absolutely. So hydration and mobility, you might want to make a note of that if you're watching or listening. Or you can check the notes or you can watch again. And then another thing we can do, and then I'm just gonna hop along here because the time is flying, but is conducting regular workload assessments. And that is something that we help people do, Lyman.
Yeah. And that's so important is how do you know when too much is too much? Most people don't. They wait, as I mentioned in our last episode last week, they wait until they're in the middle of the crises. They're drowning underneath the work, and then they kind of throw up the white flag and say, "I surrender, help." One of the strategies that we implement is creating alarm systems along the way that when you get close. For example, here's something that I do that lets me know when I'm getting overwhelmed. Whenever I get to the place of indecision, I know that I'm getting overwhelmed because now the work is becoming so monotonous or it's becoming so overwhelming that I'm unable to identify prioritization. Here's a classic example. Let's say you're working on something and you can't make heads or tails. You read it 3 times, it's not making sense, and you just feel like you're falling into a deep hole. That's a classic example where you need to stop, lay it down, and go do something that is fun.
Hmm.
Because what's happening is you're expending so much energy trying to solve this problem that your brain now needs to readjust. And the best way that you readjust and refocus your brain is to go from something that requires critical focus to something that requires very minimum. For example, watching cartoons, watching something that's silly. For
Mhm.
me, it might be watching an old kung fu movie, where the lips move, but the words come later.
No, it's so true. So yeah, you have to giving your brain permission to step back. Um, I I'm I am I can be very easily overwhelmed, which is funny because I can also be a workaholic if I don't fight the urge. So it's very interesting how those two can go together. A lot of us have personalities of extremes. Some of us have personalities that just we just kind of
Yes.
float. There's no ups, there's no downs, but I'm one of those either go-getter or totally overwhelmed personalities. So I absolutely relate to this. Here's where I literally get minor amounts of anxiety because I'm not going to call it clinical. I get anxiety at 31 flavors at Baskin Robbins. I literally do. I go in and I start getting anxious because there are 31 choices. and I'm like, so then I try like three, and I'm like, well, if I try more than three, they're gonna think I'm just like eating their ice cream. So I'll just only have three. And I'm like, yeah, I can't ever decide. And usually I always end up getting like two flavors, but then they're gonna touch each other and like a little OCD going on there. I go. But yeah, so prioritizing, asking for help, which are a couple things we talked about last week as
Yes.
well, so that you can sometimes it just takes someone else to say, look, here's what I'm dealing with right now. I feel so overwhelmed. I don't even know where to begin. And that's where when we do a lot of our coaching and consulting, that's where we're able to really help people kind
Yes.
of get out of that straitjacket that they feel like they're in and free them up. Sometimes you just need help freeing up so you can move on. And like you said, do something fun, do something different. Last week, I talked about being creative in your everyday life so that you can be creative at work. And the same would be
Hmm.
true on making decisions, whatever that means to you, whether it's video games or Sudoku or whatever your thing is. Find some fun ways to make decisions and realize it's not that you can't. It's not that you're incapable. It's just, it seems silly, but it's teaching your brain. We'll go back to the neuroscience again. It's teaching your brain that it is good at a habitual activity, and if
Yes.
you're not making habitual decisions that are small and easy, um, in good humor and fun, you're going to have a much harder time making those big
Yeah.
decisions. And then I really do want to touch on briefly here, and then we're going to have to go to the commercial break, but conducting regular workload assessments, like formal assessments, right, Lyman?
Yeah. Yeah. Looking at the work and figuring out how much work is the right amount? And that's going to depend from individual to individual. Some have
Mhm.
a larger capacity for doing a lot of work. Some they prefer to do the easy stuff first and then kind of build up to the more critical things. And then you have others that prefer to tackle the big things first, get that out the way. Now, either method will work. It depends on the individual.
What's your
And it
method?
my method is I'm a numbers guy, so I like getting as many of the little small things out of the way and then focus my energy on the big things.
Yeah.
So it's just like paying bills. For me, I like paying these little small, like if it's under $100, I'm not waiting for the due date. I'm gonna go ahead and just pay them off, all right? Because they're small. But then there are others that say, okay, this might be a 3 pay, a 4 pay, or a 6 pay. But I'm not overwhelmed because I'm mixing and matching these little smaller bills with the much larger ones. And so it just comes down to your personality, your temperament. For me, I like being able to say I got 20 things knocked off the list because they were relatively easy and simple,
Yeah.
took 5 minutes to do. But I'm okay with someone and
And
say,
that
you
is
know what, I'm gonna
really
knock out this big thing first. Yeah.
right, and that is really part of the assessments as well, is helping people figure out their individual work style. Because
Yes.
I'm like you, but instead of wanting to knock all of the small things out really fast, I use them as a unconscious way of procrastinating against the big project. And what I do is I make huge projects out of all the little projects. I start alphabetizing things
Yes.
and I start color coding things, and I can just go to town, and at the end of the day, I'm still like, oh my goodness, I didn't even start the big project. So finding your work style, finding fun ways to track it. So we're going to go to a break in 1 second here. But, lastly, just before that, I just want to remind, obviously you also have to watch for signs of your employees being overworked. You have to watch for it. Watch for the behavioral signs. Watch for the emotional signs. Watch for the physical signs. Many of those. But if you have any questions or any doubt, shoot us more questions, and we can even do another episode on that sometime if you'd like, because behavioral signs are such a really important part of
Yes.
detecting early detection. We talk a lot about health just because you and I are both interested in it. We talk about the triple bypass, which is an
Yes.
illustration from our meta work. But yeah, you have to also really keep track of what are those signs. Well, we're going to take a quick break here and be right back. I'm so glad that you are here. Please, if you haven't, while we're on the break, do like, subscribe, follow us, shoot us a question, go to our website, metagagement.com, or go to the not streaming at the moment, but the email, which will be streaming momentarily, where you can shoot us a message directly as well. We'll be right back in just one moment.
Unleash the power of focused meta mindset lunch and learn sessions. Sharpen problem-solving skills, spark innovation, foster collaboration, and build adaptability and resilience. Elevate your team's success and profits. Discover more at www.focusedmetamindset.com.
Welcome back to MetaGagement HR, where we are talking about how to integrate positive neuroscience with actionable steps to solve HR problems. In particular, this is a really fun show, and I don't know another one like it in HR that has the same kind of energy and unique approach that we bring to it. So we're super excited that you have joined us today. Thank you for sticking around. If you know someone else who might enjoy this today, shoot them over the link, either for now or for later. The same link will work later, even if you're just with our live stream now. So we've talked today about, this is our third segment on preventing employee burnout. Today, we're really talking about how to boost morale. We've talked about identifying overwork. We've talked about watching for signs of employee overwork as well. And now we just want to talk briefly, Lyman, about how we teach effective workload management. How do we teach effective workload management? And I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I do want to make some key points. So share yours.
Yeah. Before the break, you was talking about behavioral signs, and some of these, for example, if there's a decline in their work performance, maybe they're missing deadlines, they seem to be somewhat withdrawn from the team, isolating themselves. This is a good indicator, a warning sign that they're having issues or problems with managing their workload. And as a supervisor, as an HR colleague, it's very important that you help them to prioritize their tasks. Some people struggle with prioritization. They don't know where to start. They're like, I don't even know where to begin. And I always say, start with who owes you or who's waiting on you. And what I mean by that, if someone is waiting on me to get them something, that's going to take priority. Then the second step is whom do who owes me something and whom do I owe? And that goes back to being able to delegate. We talked about in the last show that really there should be two of your most popular boxes looking at your email is delegate and delete. 60% of most of the issues that lead to overwhelm is because we refuse to hit the delete button. Why are you focusing in on worrying about something that doesn't even affect your area? Delete it. Or if you're not equipped, maybe you need to send that off to someone else who is better equipped to deal with it. And I just a simple email that says, hey, this came to me, but I think this might be something you're interested in. Let me know. Shoot it off to them. They will thank you. Now you're only focusing in on who owes you something and whom do you owe. And that will help with
Absolutely.
prioritization.
That makes such a big difference. Absolutely. And not only using this for ourselves, but of course we're discussing this in particular to remind management, HR, whoever's watching today, you want to demonstrate that, you want to teach that effective workload management to your employees, to your teams, because a lot of people just need the tools. If you don't know how to
Yeah.
fix it, then you don't know what to do. Workload management is like, is like, I'd say overwhelm is like overheating. You know those the old cars, right? So my
Yeah.
grandpa had this really old red truck. It's this old ancient Ford truck that's still like curved all over. Like I don't even know how old it was. It was called Old Betsy was its name, Old Betsy, and he taught me to drive that. That was the first time I learned to drive was on a farm truck. It didn't have brakes that worked well, and we had to push it to start. But the thing always overheated. Like it didn't matter how much water was in it before we started, but it would overheat. It would water was always dripping everywhere. It's like fizzing and steaming. And the whole point was if we didn't actually fix the problem, we were going to
Hmm.
continue to overheat. And it's just like that in workload management. It's just a
Yeah.
different version. If you can't learn to prioritize the things that are going to create better solutions, delegate, and even incorporate flexibility for your teams. And that's a big part of neuroscience as well.
That's huge.
How can you
Yes.
create a flexible environment?
Right. And here's a game that I like to play with employees that really struggle with delegation and priorities. It's called "You Can Only Take Five." And I paint a scenario where you're on a sinking ship and you have five things you can add, you could take with you. Now I know you got 20, but you can only take five. If you take more than that, everybody's gonna sink and drown. And what that does, it forces you to make a decision. Then when they get to five, I was like, oh, we got another problem. Well, now we got to narrow five down to three. So you got to get rid of two. Then when they get down from five to three, I say, oh wow, okay, we're close, but now we got to sacrifice one more. We can only have two. And what that does, when you go see to go from 50 to two is too big. But if you
Hmm.
step it and you say, okay, go from let's say 20 down to 10, 10
Hmm.
down to five, five down to three, three
Hmm.
down to two, it's a lot easier for them to wrap their head around it as opposed
Absolutely.
to start with 50 and go down to two.
And I love that you're using the word things or tasks
Yes,
because when I've seen this done in other places in other forums, it's they say five people or five people
right.
from your team or five friends. Someone always gets terribly offended.
Some,
But we're,
yes.
but we're just
I'm sorry,
it's like
John. I got to stop.
Red
Right.
Rover. So I don't even know if kids play that anymore. Again,
Right.
I grew up like in the country, so I have no idea.
But yeah,
So yeah, so
and it's
go
visual.
ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say it's very visual, and people understand that the metaphor. If I try to take all of these issues with me, everyone is going to sink and drown,
Hmm. Hmm.
and there's not enough seats. So I need to prioritize, and the way that I do that is which is more important for the entire group. So another thing I would do, I would say the way you're gonna make your decision, which benefits not just you but everyone in the group.
Ooh, but isn't that a little hard to do? Like, what if you know that what benefits you most is going to get you the most praise from your manager on a task that needs to be completed, but you know what the team needs more is help in another area?
And see, that's where it forces you to decide, make a decision. Most people struggle with making these decisions. They think the decision is going to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So they make no decision at all. They're like, well, let somebody else make the decision. Nope, you have to make the decision. And that goes back, we talked about in the last episode of fire testing,
Mm-hmm.
because all of us are going to be faced where we have to narrow down to one of two decisions. Do we keep this person? Do we let them go? Well, I don't want
And
to make that decision. You have to.
no,
Based on
and
the information that you have, what's the best decision? Based on the information that you have currently.
absolutely. So teaching effective workload management, your team can't do it if you unless they love being self-taught, unless you have a very motivated team that likes to be self-taught. They need to know the tools. And
Yes.
one of the most important ways of doing that is literally demonstrating solutions. And in this case, not including time management. How do you demonstrate time management solutions? Um, And again, as always, I love scenario-based training, facilitating scenario-based training
Mhm.
in a group. It really helps people form a new way of thinking, right? It's new neural pathways, and it makes their time management or their project management more instinctive. And this is a whole fundamental element of what we talk about when we're saying about going meta is to become instinctive. We want your gut reactions to be the most effective and efficient. But you can't do that with a cluttered mind when you're weighed down, when you have so much on your plate, you can't do any of that. So, one little piece at a time. And going meta by example. I mean, leadership as always, right? Because when
Yes.
you lead an example and your team observes you, we have mirror neurons in our brain, right? And they enable your employees to emulate the behaviors of their leaders. It's just like the whole animal kingdom, right? Or it's like baby
Yes.
animals and adult animals, or birds, or baby people and adult people. So if you want to foster a culture of balance and productivity, you really do need to lead by example. Go meta by example, right?
And too often we see that in a negative. If I had a supervisor or an employer that was autocratic, top-down leadership, then my leadership style will tend to be autocratic, top-down, because I'm mirroring and matching
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
I've seen demonstrated. So
Hmm.
imagine if you had a supervisor that was more collaborative, that was communicative. In other words, really thought your opinion, listen, then you will match and mirror that same type of persona that's being demonstrated for you. So that's why it's very important for leadership to make sure that they're going meta, that they're exhibiting the qualities, the character that they want their employees to exhibit.
I mean, I'm going to
Government.
borrow a parenting
Yeah.
metaphor here, which is, when you'll see a parent now and then, like, um, the child yelling at the parent, and a small child, and the parent is like, "Don't you yell at me!" But then, if you watch for a little
Yes.
longer, you realize the parent yells at them all the time. Well,
Yes.
it wasn't the kid's idea. Like, you are mirroring, you are observing, you are watching. So what you demonstrate is what your team is going to pick up on. And I think having an open feedback system, really open, even vulnerable, safely vulnerable experience with the people who you work with, or the people you work with the team, or the people who are you're in charge of in HR, to also ask them to giving you updates and evaluations on a regular basis, maybe even voluntary, more than is required, right, by the company. What about being that open and honest with them? You're gaining their trust, and they're also saying, "Oh, wow, so she's actually asking us, what is it about my communication style that you think I could improve? That's my question of the week. Please send your message, send your answers in." And they tell you, and you're like, you can receive that as positive criticism, right? And then also show that they could come to you and say, "Listen, I have I struggle with my communication style, and I think ours kind of passes in the night sometimes. And maybe if we could both discuss it for a few minutes,
Mhm.
we could both find ways to get in alignment." As we always say, you don't have to always
To
agree, but at
agree.
least get in alignment
Yeah.
so we're working in the together in the same direction.
Right. Here's an example, a real life case study. Several years ago, I had hired a young man whose name is Al. And Al grew up in a large family where they yelled at each other, they would hit the table, and we would be in meetings. I shared this story before on one of the podcasts, but it's worth mentioning again. And we would have morning meetings, and of course, people would bring in their coffee, their tea, their hot chocolate.
Oh no.
And Al would get excited about making a point, and he would slam his hand on the table, and you would see coffee flying everywhere, and people looking at him. So finally, about the second time it happened, I called out. I said, "Al, we got to talk." And I said, "Why do you keep hitting the table?" And he explained to me that that's what his mom and dad did. When they made a point, they hit the table. And I said, "Have you noticed that people's coffee is flying everywhere?" He was he was not aware of it. Suddenly, I said, "Al, what can we do so you don't hit the table?" So he starts saying, "Okay, I won't hit the table." So he started doing this little tap tap on his leg. But again, that was an example of matching and mirroring. He saw his parents do it. Now he done brought it into the workplace.
Mhm.
Folk are looking at him like he's crazy because every time we're in a meeting and they go sip their coffee, he hits the table and they're getting.
That's
I'm
such a
like, they're
great
gonna get
example,
sued.
though. I'll never get tired of that example because it's just so believable and it's like so perfectly on point, as is our producer telling us the time is up. Thank you,
Yes.
um, but this is really great. I think that these strategies to prevent burnout are so critical. How do you help your employees feel appreciated? How do you burst morale? So much of it is identifying it, preventing it, watching for signs, but then also really personally getting involved, teaching how to manage the workload, demonstrating workload and time management solutions, and really keeping an open door policy, an open ear policy. I'm going to call it an
I
open ear
like
policy,
that. Open ear policy. I
an
love
open ear policy, and actively asking questions is literally one of the best tools you can ever use. Well, we have to wrap up like in the next 25 seconds. So thank you so much for joining us today here on MetaGagement with myself, Ann Scottlin, and Dr. Lyman Montgomery. MetaGagement-HR. Please share this with your other HR friends. Shoot them a copy of this link, or even if they're not in HR, but you think these are great tools and techniques that you can use in any work or team environment. And we're really happy that you joined us here for this 3-part series on how to get rid of employee burnout. And next time, we're going to answer some more of your questions that you've sent along. So please send us more. You can go to our website, of course, metagagement.com, or you can email the link that has scrolled here during the show. Join us next time, streaming as always on Fridays, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. GMT. Before you go, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out and keeps this content coming to you. We can't wait to talk to you next week, and we look forward to getting your messages. Thanks, Lyman.
it. Thank you. Go Meta, everybody.
Bye, everybody.